another Talkin TV Top 10. Let's talk about Succession. After a long, hard year of uncertainty, we finally got the long-awaited return of Season 3 in October after a gangbuster Season 2 finale back in 2019. It launched the show to the top of the must-watch TV list. It won a shit ton of Emmys, including Best Drama and Best Actor for breakout lead Jeremy Strong, and it ensured that this new season was the most anticipated thing going into 2021. The show's signature brand of insult humor mixed with some of the darkest, most twisted Shakespearean drama allows it to have a unique spot as the next in the long line of prestige television. And after a crazy season full of the show's signature twists and turns, and with the finale right around the corner, I decided to do another top 10 TV characters list because boy does this show have its fair share. So without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite characters from Succession. Willa Ferreira and Lady Caroline Collinsworth. This spot's a tie because, newsflash, this show has a lot of great characters to choose from, hallmark of any great show. But I picked these two in particular because of the Season 3 finale and how they interestingly complement each other in a way that I don't think a lot of people have really picked up on. Willa is Connor's live-in girlfriend, a former call girl, an outsider looking in who seems to have some sort of real affection for Connor outside of his money. Lady Caroline Collinsworth, introduced in the final 2 episodes of Season 1 as the main 3 Roy siblings' mother, is seemingly a warm alternative to Logan's cold, uncrouchable demeanor, but quickly shows that her supposed warm facade is nothing more than a mask to hide the cold, loveless interior, to the point where she straight up disappears rather than actually giving her son some sort of comfort in his woes. The reason why I have the two of them tied for this spot is because, in a strange way, Lady Caroline is both the future version of Willa while at the same time providing an alternative direction for where someone like Willa could go in this world. Despite being a commoner, Willa displays an impressive amount of smarts, successfully navigating her way through the muck and vocal jargon of Connor's siblings, and even successfully helping him write a speech that allows him to dodge a reporter at a funeral. Lady Caroline, who comes from great wealth, married below her class, and seemingly suffered in silence to retain her lifestyle, maintains a cold understanding of how the world works and is content with her place rather than being willing to change it. She even goes out of her way to lament her sorrows by confessing that she'd wish she'd never had children to her own daughter, a scary transition into the next episode in which Willa reluctantly accepts Connor's marriage proposal before the camera immediately cuts to her inside the car looking out, a frequent theme employed in HBO shows, that of people feeling trapped in their positions in life. Easily the most refreshing thing about Succession is how it's able to demonstrate what women have to deal with in this sort of environment at every level, and these two are both fascinating, new, and different kinds of examples of that. STEWY HOSSEINI. What is it about this show and making even its most hateable character somehow likable? Succession always does this, and has since the very beginning, where they'll introduce a character, straight up tell everyone that they should not trust this character, and then somehow make it a surprise when said character turns out to be a snake in the garden. STEWY is pretty much the open embodiment of that. Introduces Kendall's college friend who is now a private equity owner. His role in the show has always been an interesting one, as he really has no major stake in anything, seemingly just rolling the dice at any point for his own personal amusement. Kendall first brings STEWY on for a quick cash injection after he discovers that Waystar is badly in debt, in exchange for stock options and a seat on the board. This unfortunately proves to be the next in a long line of bad decisions made by Kendall, as he discovers that STEWY is also being bankrolled by Logan's longtime enemy Sandy Furness, who has been looking to take over Waystar for the longest time. After being completely overpowered by his father at their attempted coup of his at the vote of no confidence, a move in which STEWY completely screws Kendall over by choosing to abstain, Kendall attempts to team up with the two of them to enact a bear hug hostile takeover maneuver, but this is again screwed up when Kendall's accidental murder of the waiter at Tom and Shiv's wedding gives Logan the ammunition he needs to completely break his son down and bring him back over to their side. While he ultimately does come off as yet another character who's only there to deliver quips and one-liners, STEWY proves that his cunning comes from one place that the Roys just cannot seem to get behind. He has no emotional attachment, something that makes him very dangerous and very unpredictable. His future stake in the show is a little bit ambiguous to say the least, since the seeming hostile takeover has now been squashed due to Shiv and Sandy Furness Jr.'s maneuvering. But only time will tell whether STEWY is fully out or not. GERRI KELLMAN, general counselor to Waystar, and really the only female presence at that level of the company. GERRI is, like so many other iconic HBO characters, a background player that slowly works her way up to the foreground throughout the first half of the first season. She's shown quickly to be a survivalist first and foremost, but is also one of the only characters that's able to speak openly and honestly to Logan, often advising him in the best direction in a way that a lot of the other characters find themselves unable to. Like other Waystar legacy executives Frank and Carl, GERRI is consistently stuck between a rock and a hard place, having to deal with the incompetence and various Roy egos and personalities on display, and what's best for the company, while also making sure that she still has a future stake. Unlike those other two figures, however, she's able to stay just divorced enough to make sure that she lands on her feet, something that a lot of other characters on the show just cannot seem to grasp. Her ultimate undoing, however, comes at the hands of Roman, with whom she forms a semi-flirtation with before it completely blows up in her face this past season. GERRI is in a lot of ways the ultimate success story of the show, even being named interim CEO when Logan is forced to step away during the Cruises scandal. But will her intelligence and savviness be enough, or will the chickens finally come home to roost? Shiv Roy. Easily the most problematic of the Roy siblings, and that's saying something considering that, you know, she's a Roy, which in this world is the equivalent of literally being Satan. Not the spawns of Satan, Satan. Shiv is introduced to us as being on the outside looking in, and she doesn't work directly for Waystar, rather working as a political consultant. She eventually falls victim for Logan's latest scheming and manipulation when he tells her that he wants her to succeed him in season 2, only to get railroaded when Logan seemingly falls for Holly Hunter's Rhea Jarrell. The thing about Shiv as a character is that more than any of the other characters, she is solely in it for herself, even willing to offer up her husband Tom if it suits her needs. She never makes a move unless she can get something out of it, and this is especially put on display in season 3, between her taking shots at Kendall by bringing up his history of addiction on a public forum, and her single-handedly saving the company by sealing the deal with Sandy Furness by appealing to get something for both of them as daughters of these aging CEOs. But Shiv's weakness ultimately comes from thinking that, very similar to Cersei Lannister, she's a lot smarter than she actually is, and you start to see cracks in the armor when, despite her pulling off a lot of moves that truly did benefit the company, she's still not taken seriously, consistently undermined at every turn, and finally completely mansplained twice by Roman, first with the presidential candidate and then with Alexander Skarsgård's Lucas Madsen. She's a character that is only just starting to realize that she's trapped in a cage, and only time will tell what she's willing to do to get out. Logan Roy. L to the motherfucking OG himself, Big Papa Roy. I still love the fact that when I saw the trailer for the first season of the show, I realized that Brian Cox was probably the most recognizable star, just given that he's been in so many things. Now, he and everyone else in the cast is a bona fide superstar, but it's definitely very rewarding for a nerd like myself. Logan Roy is pretty much the definition of a typical HBO character. Narcissistic, controlling, a pathological liar, and ruthlessly effective at what he does, which includes making sure Waystar controls pretty much every source of information on the planet and psychologically destroying his children. But the reason I have him so relatively low on the list is a similar problem that I have with Shiv, which is that the writers can't seem to make up their mind on him. When he's first introduced, Logan is in very ailing health, and it seems that Marcia, his third wife, is pulling the strings to kick off the events of the series. However, after making a seemingly miraculously recovery and returning to the fold, he seems to be just fine come season 2, which definitely takes Kendall's very legitimate arguments that he is not mentally or physically sound enough to continue to run the company down a peg. But regardless, the genius of Logan as a character is the ambiguity surrounding all of his decisions, because one minute he seems genuinely interested in having one of his kids take over, and the next he's playing mind games with them, seemingly in an attempt to continue to prolong his tenure as CEO, and metaphorically his reign as the king. It makes it even more interesting seeing him brought to such a desperate low in season 3 by Kendall's revolt, as Logan is not someone who is really known to show any vulnerability, and shows potentially a new side, and that the reign may be coming to an end for this aging king. Connor Roy. This one's an interesting one because I think this is the first time where I've loved a character that contributes pretty much nothing to the overarching plot, but still feels like such a rich, meaningful part of the show. I don't know if that's Alan Ruck's performance, the brilliant writing, or a combination of both, but either way, it just works. There's this thing that happens with oldest siblings where they can sometimes end up being this strange, delusional personality because the attention towards them wanes with age and more siblings, and while Connor seems to be on the outside of the action, slowly but surely the show brings him more so into the fold, showing him to be just as deluded, just as emotionally crippled, and just as in need of their father's vindications as his half-siblings. The only one of Logan's children seemingly not interested in the throne, Connor resides in the aptly renamed Argestes Ranch in New Mexico with his girlfriend slash former call girl Willa, and his antics include funding her terrible play and running for president of the United States. Consistently labeled as the joke character by both the viewers and the other characters on the show, the interesting thing that's revealed about Connor over the course of this past season is how he truly does deeply care about his siblings in ways that weren't previously known, having taken them on a lot of trips and attempted to replicate the feelings of warm family bonding that their father just couldn't be bothered with when the others were younger. It shines a new light on him and shows that there's more to this half-sibling than meets the eye, and potentially showing a warmer direction for the other characters in the show. Greg HIRSCH, arguably the only person with any morals or values on this entire show, but only just. Clearly the writer's favorite character from minute one, Cousin Greg has climbed very far since his introduction as the mascot for one of the various Waystar Royco theme parks. He falls in with the Roys thanks to his grandfather Ewan, and ends up as Tom's number 2 in parks, and due to his demeanor, immediately finds himself at the subject of the Roys, and mostly Tom's abusive comments. But the beauty and fun of a character like Greg is that his cluelessness allows him to float around Waystar's hive of scum and villainy with relative ease and little attention, while also using his slow, progressive, and smartly withheld street smart to gain a little leverage and a position for himself, even finding himself as Kendall's unwitting number 2 when Kendall revolts against the family. It's the audience avatar at its most realized form, with the only question remaining: will Greg eventually fall victim to the Roy's influence, or will he escape unscathed? Only time will tell. Tom WAMBSGANS. I want to take a second and talk about what kind of a disaster this character could have been in the wrong hands. I definitely get the sense that Jesse Armstrong and the writers were drawing on other character types of this ilk from movie history, but the twist they do on it here is beyond subversive. Tom is an outsider vying for something that is so far out of his league on every conceivable level: a seat at the coveted Roy table and a place in Shiv's cold, dead heart. He has neither, but he attempts to make up for it in convincing displays of ruthless demonstrations of power towards those lower than him, particularly towards Greg. And it would be one thing if Tom was on the level of Greg in the sense that he actually had morals, but he isn't. Tom is has sold himself out so hard and is just as morally corrupt and devious as the rest of the characters here. And the crazy part is that you still end up feeling for him in some way. Consistently seemingly stuck between a rock and a hard place, Tom's ultimate fatal flaw, and more than likely his undoing, is his constant indecisiveness between being a ruthless killer and desperately wanting to be loved. But the only thing differentiating him from the other characters is that, as stated above, he's not a Roy at the end of the day. And with Shiv's official proclamation of her stance towards Tom, his volunteering to take prison time for Logan, his consistently spiraling mental state, all seem to be leading towards a very, very dark end for Tom. Roman Roy, the epitome of the youngest sibling. Roman ranks this highly on the list because I don't think I've had this hard of a turnaround on a character since Jaime Lannister, where I went from absolutely hating them to straight up loving them and then right back to hating them. The beautiful thing about Succession as a show is that it incorporates so many different styles of acting, from Cox's more shouty, loud, boastful performance to strong, subdued method acting to Nicholas Braun's goofy, constantly trying to out-awkward himself performance. But easily the winner for the motor-mouth improvisational style of acting goes to Kieran Culkin's performance as the youngest Roy sibling. So much so to the point that not only is Kieran currently more relevant in the pop culture zeitgeist than his older brother who starred in Home Alone, I'd remind you, but also landed himself in the trap of people not being able to see him outside of this character. Like, I literally can't even watch Scott Pilgrim vs. the World anymore without seeing Culkin in it as Roman. But it's not just the one-liners that make him, even though they are a mile a minute and each one is funnier than the last. Roman comes onto the show as a cocky parody of a rich trust fund daddy's boy and evolves over the course of the first 2 seasons into someone who is tragically emotionally scarred, has some serious mommy issues, and actually has a lot more to offer than initially lets on. But over the course of the last couple of episodes, Roman begins displaying a surprising knack for leadership and ruthlessness that both of his siblings seem to be lacking, bringing in new presidential candidate Jared Mencken and finally getting Waystar in attack by seemingly befriending Gojo CEO Lucas Madsen. Culkin's vicious display of consistent insults as a means of both self-protection and sabotage shows that he may have learned where Kendall and Shiv have not, and could potentially outrace both of them for the #1 spot. Before we move on to the #1 choice, here are some honorable mentions. Kendall Roy. The #1 boy makes the #1 spot. Kendall starts out the series as seemingly the only semi-decent character in this family full of frauds, but over the course of the 29 episodes that have aired, it becomes immediately more clear that Kendall has both suffered the most under Logan and is the most like him. Simultaneously insecure and full of himself, cocky and self-destructive, a recovering addict who views himself as a pure innovator, Kendall's the epitome of what Succession is all about. Children vying to make something for themselves in the tech-driven social media age, but unable to escape the throes of their parents. Every time Kendall tries to make a move on his own, he either self-sabotages himself or the latest act of God comes in to forestall him, because as Logan constantly reminds him,
not a killer. You have to be a killer.
This most recent season sees Kendall finally seemingly manage to break free from Logan's grips by declaring open war on him and the company, but even that ends up backfiring when it seemingly comes off as a couple of tabloid-grabbing stunts that have a serious impact on his mental health. The tragedy of Kendall is that unlike Tom, who we're meant to feel sorry for but has no real morals, or Roman, who has his moments of sympathy but ultimately proves too vain and tactless to actually be good at anything, or Shiv, whose overconfidence vastly outweighs her actual abilities, Kendall does stand to actually be the best of the Roy clan in theory. He's the most weighed out, he seems to be the smartest, he wants to push the company in the right directions, but he's the ultimate example of why the Roys cause more harm than good. He may be Logan's #1 boy, but he's every bit a worthy addition to the canon of HBO characters, making him the best Succession character. And that was it. Those are my top 10 favorite Succession characters. Who are some of your favorite characters from Succession? Did I get them in the right order? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them in the comments section below, and be sure to also click the like button and the subscribe button, and follow us on all of our social media platforms at Talkin TV Podcast on both Facebook and Instagram. Thanks as always, people. We'll be back next year with more content and top 10s, and as always, remember, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies.